All right, so are you ready to really take your English pronunciation to the next level? We've got all of your sources here, and it looks like you want to sound more fluent, like fast. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We'll dig into those techniques that'll help you sound more like a native speaker, more natural and confident.
Yeah.
Think of this deep dive as like your pronunciation toolkit. We're going to unlock some serious secrets, okay? Like how to tackle those tricky sounds, like the R, and even the secrets about how native speakers kind of make their speech flow so smoothly.
It is interesting. A lot of people get really stuck on the sounds that just don't exist in their own native language. It's almost as if they're trying to use a tool they've never even seen before.
Yeah, like a pronunciation tool that's missing. Okay, so let's find those missing tools I see in your sources here. You got some stuff about minimal pairs, things like ship versus sheep. Can you talk about that a little?
Minimal pairs are really cool. They're like a workout for your ears and your mouth at the same time. They help you to really zero in on those very subtle sound differences. Take ship and sheep as a good example. The only difference there is the vowel sound ship uses a short I sound like in sit, and sheep uses a long E sound like in see. So by focusing on those very subtle shifts, you're training your ear to hear them and then your mouth to produce them.
It's almost like learning to taste the difference between two very similar wines, like you start to notice the nuances. But what about those really strange sounds for English learners? The ones that make them sound like, well, English learners.
Yeah, those are the sounds that kind of make people say, I'm learning English.
Yeah.
The 3 sound is a really good example. It doesn't exist in a lot of languages. No. And it involves placing your tongue in a way that can feel very awkward at first. So imagine if you gently bite the tip of your tongue and then blow air out. That's the starting point for words like think this and the.
I can remember trying to learn the "the" sound. It felt like my tongue was doing gymnastics in my mouth.
I see here you've got some tips about using a mirror to actually check your tongue placement.
Absolutely. Using a mirror is a really good tool for those sounds. It's all about getting that visual feedback. You can see if your tongue is in the right place.
Yep.
And don't worry if you feel a little silly. We all look a little strange when we're making new sounds. Think of it as like pronunciation yoga for your face.
Face yoga.
I like that.
What about the R sound? I know that one gives a lot of people trouble too.
Yeah, the English R is very difficult for a lot of people. It's different from that rolled R in many languages. You kind of want to curl your tongue slightly upward, but without touching the roof of your mouth. Imagine it as if your tongue is doing a little wave. Practice with words like red, right, and car.
I remember reading somewhere that the English R is more like a vowel sound than an actual consonant. Is that because of the way the tongue is placed?
That's a good point. The air flows much more freely than it does with a real consonant sound. Some language experts call it a semi-vowel. Wow, I never knew that. So we're really like peeling back the layers of pronunciation here.
Exactly. And once you understand how those sounds work, you can really begin to fine-tune them. It's like adjusting the strings on a guitar. A very small change can make a big difference.
Okay, speaking of small changes, what about the V and W sounds? I know people often confuse those two. Is there a trick to mastering them?
There is. These two get mixed up a lot because they use really similar lip movements. For the V sound, you very gently bite your lower lip with your top teeth and then blow out air. Think of words like voice, very, and love. Now for the W, you round your lips like you're going to say, ooh. Try words like wood, wonder, and water.
So it's really all about very subtle changes in how you position your lips.
Yes. And one helpful tip is to just really exaggerate the lip movements at first. Overdo it. It might feel silly, but it helps your mouth to kind of learn that correct muscle memory.
I like that. It's like warming up those mouth muscles before a pronunciation workout. But I've noticed that even if you get all those individual sounds correct, it can still sound a little bit robotic. What else is missing?
Yeah, the secret ingredient there is linking. That's how native speakers connect words together to make their speech sound smooth. So instead of pronouncing each word separately, they kind of blend the sounds together, almost like they're singing.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Like there's a kind of melody to it. Can you give me an example?
Think about the phrase go on. Native speakers usually pronounce it as guan. So they connect the final O of go with the initial O of on.
Ah, so it's not just about making the right sounds, but how you put the sounds together.
That's right. And another good example is look at that. It usually sounds like look at that. The T at the end of look just blends right into the A at the beginning of at.
I'm starting to see how those very subtle connections create that effortless sound that native speakers have.
And the best part is you can do it too. It takes practice and being aware of it. Start by listening to how native speakers link their words. Listen to podcasts, watch movies, and try to copy those connections.
Okay, I'm going to become a pronunciation detective. I'm going to listen for those secrets everywhere.
That's the spirit.
Mm.
And the more you listen and the more you practice, the easier those connections will become. You'll start to internalize that flow of English.
So it's like mastering the sounds is just one part. Then you have to figure out how to put all the sounds together, like a puzzle.
Exactly. And another big piece of the puzzle is stress.
Stress. Okay, I see in your sources here you've got a lot about word stress and sentence stress. Why is stress so important?
Stress is like the conductor of an orchestra. It tells you which parts of a word or sentence to emphasize. And that changes the meaning and makes your speech more interesting.
So if you stress the wrong syllable in a word, you could say something totally different.
That's right. Think of the word present. If you stress the first syllable, P-E-sent, it's a noun. It means like a gift. But if you stress the second syllable, present, it's a verb. Now it means to give something.
Wow, that's a great example of how stress can totally change the meaning.
And the same is true for sentences. We naturally stress the important words like the nouns and the verbs. Words that aren't as important, like articles and prepositions, we don't stress as much.
So in a sentence like, I went to the store, the words went and store would be stressed.
Exactly. It's like you're shining a light on the important information. And that's how we speak naturally. We emphasize the words that carry the most meaning.
This is really interesting. It's like I'm learning a secret code to sounding more natural and expressive. How can you tell which words should be stressed?
You learn that by listening to native speakers. Pay attention to how they stress the words in sentences. You'll start to notice patterns and get a feel for it. The more you practice, the more natural it will become.
Okay, so it's all about training my ears and then my mouth to work together.
Exactly. And there's another really fun way to practice stress.
Music.
Music. How can music help me with my pronunciation?
Music is like a playground for pronunciation. It helps you develop your sense of rhythm and timing, and that is so important for sounding natural.
So I could use music to practice stress in the correct syllables. That's right. Choose a song you like, and then listen carefully to how the singer stresses the words. And then try to imitate it. You could even tap your foot or clap your hands to the beat to get a feel for the rhythm.
I love that idea. It's like turning pronunciation practice into a game.
Exactly. And the more you play with it, the more comfortable you'll become with the natural rhythm of English.
This has been amazing. We've covered so much. We talked about those difficult sounds like the TH and the R. We've talked about minimal pairs. And we've even discovered linking and the importance of stress.
And that's just the beginning. There's so much more to learn about English pronunciation.
Ooh, I can't wait to learn more. But for now, let's take a quick break and we'll come back to this great conversation in just a minute. All right, we are back and ready to continue our pronunciation deep dive. I feel like we've already uncovered some amazing secrets about how English sounds actually work together, but I'm sure there's even more to discover, right?
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
We've built a really strong foundation. But now it's time to take things to the next level. It's like building a house. We've got the frame and the walls, but now we need to add all the details that really make it a home.
I love that. So what kind of pronunciation details are we going to add today? I see here you've got some notes on intonation. What exactly is intonation and why is it so important?
Intonation is like adding spices to your food. It brings out all the flavor and emotion. It's about how your voice goes up and down when you speak. Think about how you change your tone when you're talking. If you're excited, your voice will naturally go up in pitch. If you're sad, it might get softer and lower.
I do that all the time. Like if I'm telling a really funny story, my voice gets all high and excited.
That's exactly it. Those changes in pitch are what we call intonation, and they're really important for communicating meaning and emotion. It's why the same sentence can sound completely different depending on how you say it.
Can you give me an example of how intonation can change the meaning of what someone's saying?
Sure. Let's take a simple sentence like, you're going out. If you say it with your voice going up at the end, like you're asking a question, it sounds like you want someone to tell you if you're right. But if you say it with your voice going down, it just sounds like you're stating a fact.
You're right. The same words can have totally different meanings. So intonation is like a secret code within the language. But how do you know which intonation to use in different situations?
You learn that by listening to native speakers and by learning about the culture. Pay attention to how they use their voices in different situations. You'll start to pick up on those patterns and develop a sense of what sounds natural. And it's important to remember that intonation is not always the same in every culture. What sounds polite in one culture might sound rude in another.
So it's not just about learning the rules, it's also about understanding how people use language in different cultures. It adds another layer of complexity, but also richness to the language.
Exactly. And as you get better at using intonation, you'll find that you can use it to emphasize words express your feelings, and even be more persuasive when you're communicating.
I'm starting to understand how intonation can really take your pronunciation to a whole new level. But I see you've got some information here about rhythm. What does rhythm have to do with English pronunciation?
Rhythm is like the heartbeat of the language. It's that pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables that makes your speech flow. Think of it like dancing. Every language has its own special rhythm, and English is known for having a stress-timed rhythm.
Stress-timed rhythm, what does that mean?
It means that the stressed syllables in a sentence usually come at about the same time intervals. The unstressed syllables are then squeezed in between, creating a kind of offbeat rhythm.
So it's kind of like the stressed syllables are the beats and the unstressed syllables are the notes filling in the spaces.
That's a great way to think about it. And this stress-timed rhythm is what gives English its distinct sound.
I've noticed that not every native speaker speaks with exactly the same rhythm. Does that have to do with different accents?
Absolutely. Just like intonation, rhythm can change depending on the region or social group. Some accents might have a slower rhythm, while others are faster. But the basic idea of stress timing stays the same.
So there are different ways to do it.
Exactly. And that's what makes English so interesting to listen to. You'll hear so many different rhythms and melodies depending on who's talking.
It's amazing. I'm starting to see how rhythm and intonation really work together to create the music of the English language.
And the more you listen to and practice these things, the more natural your own pronunciation will sound. You'll start to really get a feel for the rhythm and melody of how English is spoken.
So now I need to add rhythm and intonation detective to my to-do list.
Exactly. Pay attention to how native speakers use their voices. And don't be afraid to try different things with your own intonation and rhythm. The more you experiment, the more comfortable you'll become.
I like the idea of playing with pronunciation. It makes it more fun. But speaking of feeling nervous, I think a lot of English learners worry about sounding strange or making mistakes. What advice do you have for overcoming that fear?
It's a very common feeling. Remember, anyone learning a new language goes through that feeling self-conscious. It's normal. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
The key is to focus on your progress instead of trying to be perfect.
So instead of getting upset over every mistake I make, I should just try to celebrate all the little improvements.
Yes. Every time you try a new sound, every time you connect words together, every time you experiment with intonation, you're making progress. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
That makes me feel a lot better. It's like giving myself permission to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. Remember, mistakes are not failures. They're actually opportunities to learn and grow. Embrace those moments when you mess up a word. They're really valuable learning experiences.
So I can turn my pronunciation stumbles into pronunciation stepping stones.
Exactly. And another great way to boost your confidence is to record yourself speaking.
Wait, record myself. Isn't that a little bit scary?
It can feel a bit intimidating at first, but it can really help you. It lets you hear yourself objectively and figure out what you need to work on. You can compare your recording to a native speaker's pronunciation to see how your rhythm, intonation, and stress patterns match up.
It's like having a personal pronunciation coach.
Exactly. And the more you record yourself, the more comfortable you'll get with the sound of your own voice speaking English.
Okay, I'm going to try that. I'll start by recording myself reading something short or maybe singing along to a song.
That's a great plan.
Oh.
And when you listen back to your recordings, be critical, but also be kind to yourself. Focus on what you're doing well, and then choose one or two things to focus on improving.
So it's about finding that balance between being aware of what I need to work on and not being too hard on myself.
Exactly. And remember, pronunciation is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, but it's important to enjoy the process.
I really like that. It's like giving myself permission to keep learning and improving my English pronunciation forever.
That's exactly what it is. The more you learn and explore, the more you'll discover about this amazing language.
This has been so eye-opening. We've talked about everything from how to make individual sounds to understanding intonation and rhythm, and even how to use our voices in a more expressive way.
And we still have more to cover.
I can't wait! But for now, let's take another quick break, and we'll be back in a minute to wrap up our pronunciation adventure. All right, we're back for the last part of our pronunciation deep dive. We've covered so much, from individual sounds to linking stress, rhythm, intonation. It's like we've put together this whole pronunciation toolkit.
Yeah, and now it's time to actually use it. You know, we've talked a lot about the technical stuff, but there's one more thing that's really important for sounding natural and confident.
Okay, I'm curious. What is it?
It's expressiveness. Pronunciation isn't just about saying the sounds correctly. It's also about using your voice to communicate meaning and emotion. Think
Yeah.
about actors. A good actor doesn't just read lines, they become the character and make the words come alive.
So I could pronounce every sound perfectly, but if I speak in a monotone, it's not going to sound very interesting.
Exactly. Your voice is like a musical instrument.
Yeah.
And just like with any instrument, you can learn to play it with more expression.
I like that. So how can I learn to play the instrument of my voice?
One fun way is to practice reading out loud. But don't just read the words. Try to really understand them. Imagine that you're telling a story to a friend. Use your voice to create different characters, emphasize certain words, and build suspense.
So add a little drama.
Yes, exactly. Don't be afraid to experiment with different tones of voice, pauses, and inflections. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get.
This makes me think about all the ways we use our voices every day. Like when you're talking to a baby, your voice naturally becomes higher and softer. Or when you're telling a secret, you might whisper.
That's a good point. We change our voices all the time to fit different situations and emotions. And it's the same when you're speaking English. The more you let yourself express yourself through your voice, the more natural and interesting your pronunciation will sound.
So it's not just about being correct. It's about being authentic and connecting with the person you're talking to.
Exactly. That's what makes language so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just a way to communicate information, it's a way to connect with other people and share your thoughts, feelings, and experiences.
This has been such an amazing journey. We've gone from the basics of pronunciation all the way to using our voices in a really expressive way. I've learned so much.
Me too. And I hope our listener feels like they can keep improving their pronunciation too.
I think so. So to wrap up, what are some of the most important things for our listener to remember as they continue to work on their pronunciation?
The most important thing is to remember that pronunciation is a skill that you can learn and get better at with practice. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Use them as opportunities to learn.
And remember to have fun. Play around with different sounds, rhythms, and intonations. Make it a game, a performance, a chance to explore all the amazing sounds of English.
And lastly, remember that pronunciation isn't about being perfect. It's about using your voice to connect with other people and to express your true self.
That's a great way to put it. I think we've given our listener a lot to think about and lots of tools to practice with.
I agree. And remember, the journey of learning English pronunciation never really ends. It's all about continuing to learn, trying new things, and most importantly, enjoying the language.
I want to thank our expert for sharing all these amazing insights. And thank you to our listener for joining us on this deep dive into the world of English pronunciation. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep having fun with the language.